Welcome all in, everybody, for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer. That's Thomas Dunn. And here we are. The portal has closed. At least the exits from the WCC have come to an end. And now comes obviously the arduous task of rebuilding rosters. And of course, we know a number of teams have already started to build that through. So we'll get into a lot of that. We also were able to get some time with new San Diego head coach J.R. Blount, and we got to talk with him. We'll play a bit of the conversation we had with him during this episode. The full version, the full episode, the full interview is on the YouTube channel. So be sure to go check out the full version of it there. But we are going to have to start with, well, the portal as we know right now. And what we do know is that a lot of these WCC teams are putting in work in the portal. Like, we've started to see a few of these names and started to see some of the talent that's coming back in. And we've talked about how San Diego was already kind of on the move on that. But now LMU, Pepperdine, Santa Clara, St. Mary's all have made some major noise in the first few days. And to me, like, I know that there's a lot of talent exited and it's a brand new era and there's still a lot of question marks, but I would say, at least, like, based off what we're starting to see on the athleticism front and the talent front, the WCC is still going to be pretty competitive and pretty fun to watch going into the season.
Yeah, I mean, before we start those proceedings, I'm in the process of building the Jake Ensminger statue. From my perspective, because in this day and age, you have to start celebrating those types of things. And there's a similar to what people would yearn for in the past with St. Mary's, when you had guys like Tommy Kuzi stay for a program, Matthew Dellavedova, like so on and so forth. With those types of examples, they get so rare nowadays. And Santa Clara has been afforded the opportunity, by Jake Ensminger, and so I have massive credit to him for sticking around and being that leader that a community can actually kind of rally around in this day and age. So that was cool. And then going into this portal, like you mentioned, those different teams that are like doing the business. And I think the thing is about, you can like mope, you can cry, you can say, oh no, we lost all our players, we're going to poach. But this isn't an industry where you get to wait around and sulk in yourself. Like, you have to go out and do something about it. Like, no one's going to feel sorry for you. I can't count on my hand the amount of times I've heard that from a coach in this league, both on the power level and the mid-major level. Like, no one's going to feel sorry for you. Like, you have to go use the resources you have at your disposal and go out and go make something happen in the pursuit of winning. And I've seen, to echo what you said, I've seen several teams do that. I like what St. Mary's has done. I like what Santa Clara has done. I've liked what Pepperdine's done, just to lead the pack. I know you mentioned San Diego, LMU. We'll break more of that down to start with. But in terms of, some of the leading ways and the variance of outcomes that are on the table, all things considered, there are a lot worse places to be in this league. And I think so far, so good. But still some time to go, and still some time to flesh out some more rosters with some more good teams in this league. Like, I look at Seattle U and USF. Like, how can they kind of fine tune their stuff and get some more guys in the building? So lots to like, but still lots of intrigue at the same time.
I mean, you start to look at what we're starting to see it again from San Diego. They've already signed, at least according to verbal commits, 10 guys have already signed on with the Toreros, and including what is right now the highest rated transfer in the WCC, at least incoming transfer into the WCC, and Davion Hill coming from Ball State. And it's like there's a clear tone being set by the Toreros in what they've been able to bring in. Like, Antonio Munoz was like the first one off the board for them. A lot of athleticism there, and we talked about him a couple episodes ago. It's San Diego is going to make it very interesting and very hard to ignore them in the early part of the season, because they, like, J.R. Blount has hit the ground running, and it's a roster that the very least, I think is going to kind of match what you'll hear a little bit later about just the personality of what he's looking for, because a lot of it does feel like it's character first in a lot of the guys that he's bringing in.
Yeah, I think you can you can stretch that along with a lot of different coaches, and especially when you're a first year, and in J.R. Blount's case, a first time head coach. It how you sit, and what he mentioned and what the other coaches have mentioned alongside, how you do anything is how you do everything. And it'd be so ironic for him to say those things and they bring a bunch of like kind of misfits together, but that's not necessarily the case. Like these are guys where through like his scout, and he mentioned like there's not going to be, if resources and money are the first thing you're kind of talking about, it's not going to be for you. You're bringing in guys who are like have a chip off the block, have chips on their shoulder, and ultimately are going to come to work. And I think that's exactly what you're starting to see from San Diego. And we'll see how the balance kind of shakes out because they're still navigating the late transfers out, like Gavin Ripp, for example. So we look at all that. I think all things considered, I like the context in which San Diego's operating. They're pretty, I would say, deliberate about who they're targeting, and even some I saw today. I totally misremembered his name, so that's on me for that. They're targeting a French big man. They're like in the final four, including some power four teams that are involved in really good high mid majors. So I like what San Diego's doing. I like in terms of character and especially in terms of the identity that they're trying to build. I think they're being pretty deliberate, and I think so far so good. And to echo that, on the other side, for another first year head coach in the WCC, Griff Aldrich kind of doing the same for Pepperdine. I think that Will McClendon one can pay dividends if he can stay healthy. He only got to play like 4 games this year before he got hurt for North Texas. So I think that could be a big deal. Will McClendon's got some leading scoring ability in his bag, and that will pay dividends among others for the Waves as well.
I mean, yeah, the kind of the quattro that Pepperdine is bringing in, led by Lloyd McClendon, is a pretty impressive group. Petar Mastorovich coming from Long Beach State, but this was someone who comes from a Power Four school. Anthony Robinson coming over from Xavier, Evan Haywood coming over from Butler. So you have some guys coming over from big conference experience, and I think that's one of the things that, looking at this Pepperdine squad, uh, again, I mean, a lot of it was there's only one direction to go from where they were. So it's not like that we're like Pepperdine's being graded on a curve to an extent, but at the same time, it's, hey, it does feel like that this is a better return than we've seen Pepperdine have in the portal over the last few years. And there had to be some momentum for them going into the new building, going into with a new head coach and everything else. Like, that's the one thing, at the very least, you like the aggressiveness of what Pepperdine's trying to do in this early go. And also, because again, think San Diego, think Pepperdine, that are both in this. LMU has hit the ground running. Zion Sensley, which is a familiar name to for the last couple of years, he's heading to LMU as one of the higher rated recruits going in. You also have Mazzy Mosley going over there. Andy Sigaskar also heading over from Tarleton State. Like, LMU's also made a pretty loud impact. Now, again, we've seen LMU have some good portal. I mean, last year was a good portal year, I thought, for the Lions, but obviously did not work out on the court as well as obviously they would have wanted. So you kind of take it with a grain of salt. And I think you take it all with a grain of salt, because everything looks good on paper right now as we're talking about it in April and May. It may not look so great once they start practicing together in September and October, and it starts to kind of it can go sideways at times. But right now, it's looking good for a
Yeah, I
lot
think
of teams.
you have to enjoy it for what it is, which is fine, especially since we're in April and we have, let me do the math here, less than 7 months until opening tip off. So cool. Like we'll enjoy LMU for what it is, but I echo the sentiments of that's for me a strictly on court product is what I'm looking for there. Like I dig some of the potential of some of the guys in there, and that's all well and good. And I think LMU fans would largely hold the same tune of I just need to see it. And we saw it for roughly 7 games last year where things were looking good. You go win in the Thunderdome at UCSB, you're feeling good. You got the post game dances going on, and then everything fell off a cliff. And it feels like it's just kind of done that for one reason or another over recent years. So LMU, again, like tools, intriguing. What do you actually show me? That's the other part of this equation. So that's kind of what I'm looking at more than anything, as much as I value it. St. Mary's, on the other hand, as well. I think they're also putting in some work. And let me make sure, even though it's a new era, they're still bringing in guys with very complex names. So let me go slowly here. Thomas and Dong, I think that could be a transfer from CBU. He could be, I think, a real X factor. And the one that I'm intrigued by just by sheer opportunity, Evangelist Zugris. He's the one from Louisville. That's the one where I'm looking at it like, okay, Mickey McConnell, you want to show me a little something. That's a heck of a way to start. Those are the two I've mainly been focusing on in terms of the Gales transfers, and I think their gravity is I think that's kind of what stands out among both of them. I'll need to dig in a little bit deeper just to find out more of their nuts and bolts in terms of their characteristics. But in terms of the level of transfers bringing in and kind of trying to keep that talent curve at a similar level when Randy Bennett left it, those are not some bad places to start.
Now, I think the two you bring up, both Zugris and Ndong, I think they bring kind of two very different things up. Zugris is, from everything I've kind of looked at and read to this point, like this is someone who's going to be bringing the physicality to this front line. And that's something I think that St. Mary's, to an extent, was missing a bit, because when you think about the St. Mary's teams of, say, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I mean, probably focus on like when Mitchell Saxon was still anchoring that front line, just there was a physicality and a toughness that uh, to that back line of the Gales that it it made you think twice about going in there. And I think this is the type of guy that's going to make you think twice about going in there, because uh, Zugris, who is from Greece, like bringing that that European toughness, I think is going to be a thing that St. Mary's needs. Dong, I think, also can bring us something a little bit different. Maybe someone who could play above the rim, which is actually not something we've seen St. Mary's have all that often. Uh, so I think that's another one. Cal Baptist last stop, but it was also with Wayne Tinkle up at Oregon State prior to that. So this is someone who, at least like a couple stops away, is in a familiar spot for St. Mary's. And then the other one, Luke Fennell, like coming over from Syracuse. And of course, but where is he originally from? From Australia.
Hey, come on. You could have
Australian.
You could have let me guess at least. I thought I could have nailed that one.
But I mean, this is another guy who, again, you're thinking about that Aussie pipeline, someone who is going to be able to bring that. We know the personality of the St. Mary's Aussies and what they are able to bring in. We know that Josh Dent is still going to be there. We know that Rory Hawk is still going to be there. So there's still this line of goods Australians that kind of come through the program. And of course, there's also a few more that are coming in this season. So St. Mary's will not be devoid of some international flavor. Again, like all three of these guys are international. We got Greece, Australia, and Canada represented amongst these three. So St. Mary's is going to, as it usually does, have a very very strong international feel.
What's the solution when you potentially lose the Australian architect and Australian pipeline? Double down on Australians. That's the solution, and that's gonna be really cool. That you still get to, not that these decisions kind of hinge on what marketing does, but cool to see like those Australian Heritage Nights, that kind of like last year when Harry Wessels and everybody else were able to get have that celebrated and such. Lithuanian basketball night when Morauskas was around there. So and Uzanis. So just those little things, I think. Let's see if they incorporate a Greek Heritage Night or something like that, just to keep the international flavor more at home, because that's something it's a little bit more of a transition, I think, than people give it credit for. On the other side, Santa Clara is they're keeping their African big pipeline going. City Gay, the transfer from Arizona, who I got to see in person but not play with Arizona in San Jose at the Sweet 16 Elite Eight, and then the one where I'm like, how did you pull that off? David Castillo from Kansas State, double figure scorer in the Big 12. I told somebody else this, and this is not deep level analysis, so to speak. But the way I view this is, I think someone is unironically saying, "I want to go to the NBA. I'm going to Santa Clara." I like this. That is exactly what that reads to me. I feel like this is the beginning of like the J Dub Pods, Alan Graves pipeline, kind of moving up to center stage and saying, "Hey, you have opportunity. Can I go get some money at Boston College or something? Sure, but do I want to go to the NBA and have the ball in my hands? You know what? Let's go to Santa Clara." I think this is genuinely one of the first times I can say, I think that this is where you see in the NBA, the dream of the NBA pipeline taking shape.
I mean, I think that's the one thing, is like Santa Clara has done such a good job of going out and getting Power 4 players to come to that program, and also, again, like guys who have had some at least some level of success coming in. And now, of course, like Pods didn't play much at Illinois, so that was kind of like a not quite a shot in the dark. But when you have a Mr. Illinois come in and go to Santa Clara, that's obviously a big get. But now getting someone who has legit minutes and we has a track record in a Power Four, and is going to bring that to Santa Clara, that is a big deal. And the they're not Santa Clara's not the only school who's been able to kind of pull from those Power Four ranks, because Seattle U also pulled from Iowa State, getting Mason Williams to come in. So Seattle native was at Eastern Washington a couple seasons ago. So again, WCC teams are not asleep at the wheel. And the one thing I think that is the biggest component here, especially when you think about San Diego's now on the move, Pepperdine's on the move, you have Seattle making moves, you have Pacific making moves, is that for the first time in a long time, the field is wide open in the WCC. I saw it posted the other day. I need to give credit where credit is due on the notes. Hold on, I need to find it. But essentially, the message is that it was easier for Todd Golden to go to. It was easier for Todd Golden to win a national championship at Florida than it was for him to finish second in the WCC in the old version of the league. Which again, Coach Jeremy Grubbs, gonna give him credit for that one, because again, like that was one of the crazier things is that, and we always kind of knew it. It's like, well, 1-2 Gonzaga St. Mary's, Gonzaga St. Mary's, Gonzaga St. Mary's, and that's kind of the way it was for damn near 20 years. But that won't be the case anymore. No Gonzaga, a different era of St. Mary's basketball under Mickey McConnell. We know what Santa Clara does look like. Maybe the team coming off a tournament bid still has their head coach, still has the NIL budget to be able to kind of maintain and sustain what the success they've had over the last couple of years. But there is now an opportunity for a lot of these teams, and it does look like early on that a lot of the schools are trying to take advantage of that fact.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to look at the potential upcoming media rights and say, oh no, we have to keep our money inward, so to speak, and all that. But you mentioned like the league is there for the taking, and I've mentioned it continuously with Santa Clara. St. Mary's wants to uphold their standard as it was, and you got some other teams who now with this kind of revamped WCC tournament format, which I think plays like a supplemental factor in all of this, like you feel like you have a chance to make your own claim and make a name for yourself once again. If you're the case of San Diego, or you're the case of LMU, or you're kind of a new kid on the block trying to get things going again, like Seattle U. I think there's so many different paths to ultimately what wants to be the same conclusion. That potential for wide openness / parity is a big way to view it and say, look, this is a chance where we can have basketball, which for pretty much other than USD is the focal point for athletics across campus, because they do have football, and maybe San Diego fans will come at me saying the football program doesn't matter, but like there's still a massive chance for these schools to put their name out there. Like when you make a March Madness run and you get to either have a really good game or you get to win a couple games and be the Cinderella, the amount of return on investment that is for you and the school as a whole, I think you can't quantify that. You really can't. And I noticed it this year with Santa Clara. I know you've noticed it with St. Mary's over the years, and just the level of magnitude and I guess brand recognizability that you get. It's second to none. So I'm intrigued to see how many more of these schools continue to invest in their programs, and kind of who ultimately takes the reins of this conference.
Now, actually, I do want to make one, because I don't remember. Like, did we actually do an episode in between the last one and when Sash announced that he was coming back?
I don't think we did. I think it just kind of happened.
So it did. I think it was like right after, like the day after we recorded the last one, where he announced that he was making his return. So did want to give you the chance that you will continue to be able to get your Gavalugov on.
Yes, I will continue to take my medicine in the Gavalugov pharmacy. So, it's cool to have him back. Really good shoot off the ball, off the dribble shooter. I think when you look at his creation, I still maintain the way of he's a guy who can win you and lose you games in March. High variance player, but when he's unafraid of the moment, which I think you could see in Las Vegas, you could see for the better part of the game against Kentucky, and for the level of talent that this WCC is going to have, I think Sash Gavalugov is going to be on the upper echelon of that. He's going to be a really good guy. I really want to see how he can work with his centers and utilize the lob and the bounce pass a little bit more next year. Get some more rim running there. Maybe City Gay will be part of that fold. Chris Tadjo, who's basically a de facto transfer because he missed the whole season with injury. I think that's a guy who could be really unlock Santa Clara a little bit. So I look at Sash. He's going to have all the control and creative control that he wants. And I think easily among the front runners for WC.
Yeah, he'll definitely be up there amongst the contenders for obviously on the first team, potentially player of the year. Like there's a lot of, again, openness to what we're going to see in the WCC this year. But as you kind of look at like what we've seen early on in the portal, I mean, it feels like for the extent of what certain teams had to do or whatnot, that I mean, San Diego feels like the team right now that has kind of been the front runner in kind of grades for the portal in the WCC, because like you look at who they've been able to add, what they've been able to bring in. JR Blount has just done a really good job of very quickly kind of building this roster, and he does talk a bit about that in the interview we're going to be bringing up.
Yeah, I mean, let's go. Let's rock. I mean, this is, I think, honestly, one of the most, at least for me, one of my favorite interviews I've ever done, because we had seen JR Blount and we had heard him talking like his opening press conference, we had never gotten to see him in this type of setting together, just like one-on-one and such, or I guess 1 versus 2 in this case. And I like the energy that he brings. I think he's very intentional about what he says and what he does. And I think if nothing else, I think he's going to put a product that USD fans of the community are going to be proud for. Now we'll get to like the more of the basketball stuff as we see it and see fit. But in terms of the floor that you're trying to build and the culture you're trying to build, he's saying all the right things. He's doing all the right things. I really like him being out there personably on social media in terms of handing out donuts to students. You got coaches who are just going to shelter in their office and say, I got to work. Like, we ain't doing none of this social media stuff. So I like the fact that he's open to that, open to these types of interviews. And I think San Diego, they got a good person at the helm, all things considered.
Yeah, they got a good one. So we'll play a portion of the interview that we were able to record earlier in the week. The whole thing is available on the YouTube channel, so be sure to go there, subscribe, make sure you get these others, because there'll probably be a few other interviews as we get further into the off season that we'll play bits and parts and full episodes like this, and then you'll have to go to the YouTube to find the full versions, full length interviews there. All right, so we'll sign off and play a bit of that interview. So be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you're listening to the show. Be sure to follow along on social media at unofficial WCC pod. That's Thomas. I'm Zach, and we will leave you with JR Blount.
You're the kind of the community, and I've seen you did the whole donut video handing out to students. You've been talking to students in a lot of the social clips and such. Why is it kind of important to you to kind of make those types of connections? Because it's very easy to say, look, I have to go to work, I have to sit in my office, I need to do this thing and have my peace while I work with my staff. But you've been showcasing a lot of your, I guess, external personality and talking with the community and students. Why is that important to you as you hit the ground running?
Yeah, I want to be a head coach for, the men's basketball program, but also for the university. I think men's basketball is the front porch of this university from the athletic standpoint. And, I want to be visible and accessible to the community, not only just be in our little realm of our practice facility, but be out and be able to integrate myself so that students know who I am and know who our team is, and can ultimately get them to come to the games to support us. And in order to do that, I have to do the job to them. I have to be out there to them, and we're all humans, and they just have to see that and kind of get to know me and get to know my personality. So, yeah, I'll pass out donuts. I was passing out coffee as a barista a couple of days ago, talking to the wellness center or students over here. It's whatever it takes. We got to get people into Jenny Craig Pavilion, and in order to do that, it's not just, hey, talk, and you got to have some action behind it.
And part of that is that you also did the first pitch at Fowler Park with Coach Ungrich at baseball. Can we confirm whether that was a strike, and kind of what was it like to get on the mound?
Well, I did have I had about 10 minutes to warm up, so that was probably the first time I threw a baseball in years. I throw footballs with my daughter all the time, but Coach Brock did a great job of framing the pitch and keeping it a little bit outside the strike zone. But I got it there. I didn't bounce it. That was my big thing. I didn't want to make my wife making fun of me, telling me I couldn't get it there. So we'll call it a ball, but we'll call it. I was just getting warmed up.
I mean, you talked about the community and getting out there a little bit, and how much could you take from your experiences at some of your other stops where it's been a little bit of smaller communities, let's say Drake or St. Leo's on campus, Loyola, even though they're in the heart of Chicago, it's still kind of like little kind of a tighter knit group. What can take from those experiences to kind of maybe mirror or emulate what you can do at San Diego?
Yeah, definitely. I think Drake and St. Leo for sure, just being, smaller, tighter, private, religious institutions too, where, that deal matters. And, even at Drake, just going around, we kind of did some of the same things, going into the dorm rooms, going to the frats and sororities and speaking to them and engaging with the community on campus. I think is really important because ultimately you got to get them to come out, but you have to get to know them first, and they have to get to know you. And I think that's really essential to, the development of our fan base, which is something that we have to get better here at USD. And you have to be intentional when you do it. So yeah, those experiences really helped me. And also I know I have to go out and I have to do my part, and we have to do our part as a staff. And, putting together a group of high character young men will definitely help that too.
A part of your journey in mentioning Drake and such, and you had time with Nico Medved and Ali Farouk-Manesh at times at Drake and Colorado State. It's well documented what you took away from TJ Otzelberger and the Iowa State staff, but can you walk us through your relationship with Coach Medved and Coach Farouk-Manesh and kind of how they've bettered you both as a coach and as a person?
Yeah, Coach Medved taught me how to be a servanthood leader. Somebody who we got to Colorado State, and I had to spend a year with them at Drake, and he really changed that program, and then we changed the program there at Colorado State. And he's somebody that just always pours in and invests into the young man, and that's something that I really took from him, and he did it to his staff as well. And him and I have a great relationship. We talk almost once a week, and make sure he checks in with me. And Ali, man, he's a bum. So I don't know. That's like my best friend. He's probably my closest friend in the business. When we were at Drake, we lived right next to each other. Our wives are very close. Our kids are all close. Somebody that I lean on. We probably talk every day. So I don't take anything from him besides the fact that he just gets overhyped for one shot. So, but no, he's been great. I mean, I've leaned on him a lot just for the experience, and obviously he's got a year under his belt, so just taking all the notes and things that he were surprises to him or things that he thought worked really well, we'll share that information. I mean, I probably know everything about his roster, his staff, everything. He knows the same about us. Like we are very, very close.
Are we going to have
Colorado State San Diego matchup in the non-con?
Yeah, I told him he can come here. He can come here twice, and then we'll go there once. So I don't know what he's waiting on.
Yeah, no, I mean, hey, that'll appeal for sure in this day and age. One thing I want to add on to, and I'm going around a different part of your timeline now, is when you take a step back and you go from your time at Loyola Chicago and you're playing, and even you detailed your experience playing at Jenny Craig as a Rambler. What kind of compelled you to get into coaching? Because for some people it's a natural next step, for others it's a process and getting there. What kind of compelled you and spoke to you as you were making that transition?
Yeah, my dad coached me all growing up, so I was kind of around it. And then after when I finished playing overseas, I just wanted to stay involved with the game. And I always knew I wanted to coach. I always knew I wanted to be around young men, but as I've had some role models in my life, one of them being on my staff, Coach Pat Baldwin, I wanted to make sure that I was influencing the development of young men, especially in this foundational age, from, 17 to, well, now it's like 24, 25, it used to be 17 to 22, 21 years old. But, it's a foundational age for young men, and I want to make sure I'm there to be in the development process for them. And however I can positively influence their lives, I want to make sure I have that. So that's kind of why I wanted to coach. And obviously the accolades and all the stuff that comes with it is great. But again, I just want to develop high character young men.
I'm kind of taking it back to this move to San Diego and how all of this has kind of led to here. I think both of us, we were talking about it off air a little bit about how we've looked at San Diego for a long time as a place like, how could this place not recruit better? It's like beautiful city, beautiful campus, great food. Like there's a lot of attractive components to the city, and it's a pretty good, it's a low-key good basketball city. You think about San Diego State, you think about UC San Diego, the high school like scene in the region is also really good. But USD has had some lean years over the last decade or so. So what made this the right spot for you?
I think the vision of Kimya and President Harris, it really just struck me right away. Spoke with Kimya, early in the process, and his passion and the alignment that he wants to have within the university of their core values, but also his passion to want to win. And I think they showed that in the infrastructure development of our practice facility, which is a little over a year old but brand new, and I would think one of the top in the entire country. But then also he's invested in the rev share and going into that and allowing us to be competitive within the top tier of the WCC. And for me, when him and I sat down, and then President Harris as well, it was a vision of winning championships. It wasn't, they've shown an investment now, and I can't speak on the past, but I just know that, we'll come here and embrace everything we have, and we have everything we need to be successful right now in this league.
I was there in the building the last time San Diego won the WCC tournament at Jenny Craig Pavilion. So, like as a St. Mary's alum, that one hurts. Like seeing the Toreros do it, but like when San Diego is good, it's an exciting time, I think, for the league because there's usual that school always brings a lot of energy when they are able to put some W's in that column. Now, kind of talking a little bit about like your philosophy, because we heard during the press conference you talk about excellence as a standard and expectation, and then also the kind of the mantra, get better daily. How is that going to play out what we see from this San Diego team, the way you're starting to build this roster, and the personality of the guys that you're going to use to build this program?
Yeah, I think it's a simple standard for us. We're going to pride ourselves in daily habits. And that's why we have GBD, which is get better daily. And, I think those daily habits will be able to create your standards, and then your standards will create your culture. And then ultimately your culture defines your results. So for us, it's what we do every single day. We'll look the same. We'll have intensity when we do it. We'll have passion when we do it. But if you come to our practice, you shouldn't know if we won or lost the last game. Based on it, we'll still be going hard. We'll still have that same intensity, and we'll still have that same intentionality of what we do, because our daily habits will define our success. And that's just kind of how we're going to go about it. It'll be workmanlike. We'll be regimented, but we'll be all about development and making sure we get better every single day. And I think that's when it pays off in February and March. It's not necessarily, hey, we're at our peak in November. We'll be continuing to get better as the season goes on, so that when we approach that WCC tournament in Vegas, we'll be at our highest level.
Well, we both look forward to catching a practice down the road. But when you mentioned that philosophy and such, when were you first introduced to that type of philosophy, and why did it speak to you?
Yeah, it started with TJ at Iowa State. I have been lucky to been around a lot of great mentors, and I would consider TJ one of the top, him and Nico. And man, it just was every single day, we got after it, and it was competitive, and there was a very purposeful event to every practice, to every workout, to every film session, to every just lunch that you go with a guy. I just feel like everything that we do, it has to have intention, and it has to have a purpose, that we're developing guys, that we're getting them better. So that's where I got it, and it was very successful over 5 years. So I'm somebody when I can find success and figure out how to do it and kind of have a game plan for it, I want to stick with it. And that's just kind of how I live my life, and that's kind of the process that we'll have here as a program.
In talking about some of those connections with the players, back when I was in St. Louis for the NCAA tournament, Milan, Taman, and Joshua were very praiseworthy about kind of what you bring to the table and such, and the connections you've made on and off the court. What's it kind of, how can you put into words kind of the support you've seen from some of the guys from your previous stops, both players and coaches alike, as you turn towards this new chapter?
Yeah, I'm a relationship guy. This is turning into a transactional landscape in college basketball, and I think that's why we've had a lot of success here recruiting at USD so far. Is we found guys that wanted to be in relationships. They want to have relationships with their head coach, with their assistant coaches, and we're not talking about transactions first. Like if that's one of the first conversations that we have, they're just not for us. And those three guys are testaments to that. Those are all guys that, I recruited and went out and got and developed relationships with before they decided to come to Iowa State. And, I think though that it's just, again, they know the importance of relationships, and it's not just basketball. Those are guys I would go out to lunch with, guys that, have to my house, guys that, my kids know personally. It's just, for me, it's just bigger than basketball. We want to win as many games, as many championships as possible. But at the end of the day, the relationships are what really matters in the long term to help and develop, young men.